Hey guys, today we're working on a 1974 Ford F100 and we're going to replace the front springs and all four shocks on it. So let's get started. Okay, first thing you're going to want to do is jack the truck up and then put a jack stand under the frame. Take the wheel off and let the suspension droop all the way down. It gives you a bunch of space to work under here. And then there's a 1 1/8 inch nut that retains a spring down here that we're going to take off. There's a couple bolts up here we got to do, and then we'll take the shock off. So let's get this nut off first. There's a hole in the top here that you can drop your socket down through. And then my 1/2 inch ratchet was too big to fit through the springs or that hole. So I've got a 3/8 inch ratchet here with an adapter on that socket. You can also use a box end wrench or something like that. But we'll just break this free. That sucks. There's that nut. Okay, now we'll go ahead, take the two bolts out up here. They should be 9/16. There's one closer to the inner fender. That one I'm not going to take all the way out. It's on the outside of the spring, but then there's one on the inside of the spring that I am going to take all the way out. There's that one. There's one more like it back here. So then that allows you to move this bracket out of the way, which loosens up your spring. And then you should be able to actually just pull the spring out. It'll still be kind of tight in there, but not so much that you can't just give it a little twist and out she comes just like that. And then you still got the retainer on the bottom, so you can just pull the spring out. And then on the bottom, it's actually this cup, which I'm just noticing mine is cracked. That's no good. And then spring goes down, and then this giant washer basically goes right onto that. And it doesn't actually clamp onto the spring, but it is just enough to keep the spring from ever coming up. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's move over to the shock. First, we're going to do this 9/16 nut up here. You can either do this with a wrench or a deep socket, and then just make sure as you loosen it, the shock isn't rotating. Mine are both relatively loose, but they might seize up. You can see this piece of the shock can rotate. That nut comes off. There's a bushing as part of that. And then down at the bottom, there is a nut and a bolt that holds the bottom of the shock in. And these are 3/4. That nut and bolt come out. And then if your shocks are as toast as mine, you can just compress it and you should be good to go. So we'll go ahead, we'll just keep working on the shock then. Get the new one in. I've noticed these aren't super strong, so it's easy enough just to run the bottoms in, get it all lined up like it's supposed to, and then worry about the top. We aren't going to tighten any of this all the way till we load the suspension again. So know what that came out of. So I'm just going to finger tight that for right now. And then there's a metal plate and a bushing that goes on. And then you can kind of compress that side and line it back up with the hole right there. You're good to go. We'll leave that as is for right now until we get the spring back in. This spring, I'm just going to set down in here, right on the spring cup, and then kind of twist it into place. Then you'll notice there's this hump right here in the spring mount, and the coil of the spring ends, where it ends right here, needs to go up into that to make sure it's clocked correctly and to make sure your truck sits level like it's supposed to. So what I'm going to do is start tightening the bolts on this clamp that clamps the spring into place, but leave it loose enough that I can still twist this, and that way I'll then start pushing the suspension up with the jack, put a little bit of load on it, and then go ahead and line everything up into this pocket, because a little bit of load will help push the spring up into the pocket all the way, so you know when it's fully aligned. There we go. That's pretty good. So I've got it where I think it needs to be lined up. I'm going to pull the jack under here and start putting some load on it. All right, just a little bit of load. And that's perfect. We know we're lined up on the spring cup on the bottom. And we've got the end of the coil right up into that hump there. That should work just fine. I'm going to actually leave it kind of loaded right now just to make sure everything stays aligned. And we'll go ahead and put this bottom retaining bit back on. So that cup just goes on like that. You take your nut, you'll start running it down. And you just do this until it's tight. Okay, so now we can put the top of the shock on. We got this nut tightened up. We still left these loose. We're going to wait till it's setting down to tighten those all the way up. Same rubber bushing as on the bottom, but you got to make sure this emboss here, or this boss, fits in the hole up there on the bottom. And then you can run these washers down. And then another 9/16 nut. Okay, and then to fully load the suspension, I'm just going to throw this jack under here and jack it up from the I-beam till it comes off our jack stand. All right, if you wanted to, you crank these down pretty hard. I'm not too worried about it, so I'm just grabbing it. But there's a nut welded onto that at the top you can grab onto. And then to lock everything in place, these ones came with another nut that you put on the top. I'm just going to snug that up. Shouldn't go anywhere. And then you can go ahead and tighten these ones for the spring retainer all the way up. Okay. And then last, we're going to tighten this nut and bolt for the shock here. All right, there you go. Fronts are done. Let's move to the back. Okay, so for the rears, it's taking the nut off the top again, and then just taking out the one bolt at the bottom, and they come out. And these will come out pretty easy, but they'll go in pretty hard because these won't have any spring left in them. So let's take this nut out. The last one did bind up on these threads for me. So you either have to grab onto this, make sure it doesn't spin, or there's flats ground into this piece up here that you can grab, or you can do what I did, which is just take an angle grinder and cut it off. Um, Either way, you got to get this nut off. Okay, that was 9/16, and then these again are 3/4. Okay, that one's out, so let's get this next one set up and ready. You see these even have the strap around them, I guess just for packaging purposes. So as soon as you cut that strap and take this cap off the end, if this wasn't here, it'd line almost right up. It would go in very, very easily. But of course, that's the part that extends, so that's the part that they have to put the strap on. So get your stack up on here, and then on the other one, I was able to just get these started with a nut. All right, so then it doesn't come out. And then, of course, it's extended too much, and I actually have the frame jacked up a decent bit right now. I'm sure you could probably do it more, and then you wouldn't have to compress this as much. But if you use a screwdriver, you can kind of pry it into place here and line it up as you need to. Just kind of play with it till everything lines up one way or another. There you go. And then just tighten these up, and since we're already on the ground, you can tighten these all the way and you'll be good to go. And there you go, guys. That's how you replace all your shocks and your front springs on a F100. It'll be really similar for F250s and F350s with similar suspension, and I think it's even similar for the bump sides, not just the dent sides. So in general, that should cover pretty much all your bases. You can see all my shocks are shot. They won't even extend out anymore. And then you can also see I've got the tops lined up here, and my passenger side coil spring was starting to collapse, so my truck had a little bit of a tilt to it, but that should all be fixed now. Thanks for watching.